The orcs of Warhammer 40K are known not just for their savagery, but also their often humorous dialogue and sometimes their absolutely unhinged antics. In this video, we've collected some of the craziest and most interesting stories of the boys in green. We're just getting this channel off the ground, so if you want to support us and see more videos like this, subscribing goes a long way. Without further ado, we're starting things off strong with an orc that went back in time to kill his past self just to claim an extra gun. This is the story of Grizguts, the time-traveling orc. Now, many would probably think twice about giving an orc the ability to time travel, knowing the chaos that would almost certainly ensue thereafter. But in the case of Grizguts and his boys, it happened totally by accident. While traveling through the warp on their way to the Morlock system, with nothing but war on their minds, Grizguts and his warband were suddenly caught in the shifting chaos of the Empyrean, and once they were able to break free and emerge, they found themselves arriving shortly before they set off on their original journey. Knowing that his doppelganger would no doubt be nearby and holding his favorite weapon, the known kleptomaniac Grizguts decided there was only one thing for it: to find and defeat himself so that he could have a spare gun. Naturally, this ended poorly for all sides, throwing his boys into complete disarray and stopping any hope of war in its tracks. But he did get that spare gun he was after. As it turns out, nobody is safe from an orc's wild ways, even themselves. This infamous orc pirate would find himself negotiating with humans and saving an entire subsector, and the only reason he agreed was a new hat. Kaptin Bluddflagg is a brutal freebooter captain, famous across the galaxy for his savage acts of plundering and pillaging in the Coriolis sector. Unlike many of his fellow orcs, Bluddflagg is not entirely driven by the desire for war. He also desires loot and lots of it, choosing only the fights that would prove the most profitable for him and his boys. During the Third Aurelian Crusade, Bluddflagg's void ship would crash upon the jungle-covered feral world of Typhon. He would place the blame on the Eldari found on the planet, but after hunting down their leader, Autarch Caliph, and having what they thought was a decent fight before slaughtering them, the orcs would learn not all was as it seemed. Suddenly, Bluddflagg and his boys found themselves surrounded by Imperial forces under the command of Adrastia, an inquisitor from the Ordo Hereticus. She approached the Greenskins with a business proposition: help the Inquisition hunt down the rogue space marine Azariah Kyrus, chapter master of the Blood Angels, and thus prevent the total destruction of the Aurelia subsector. Bad for business if you're a plundering orc pirate. In exchange, Adrastia offered Bluddflagg a zero-consequence fight against 3 Imperial Guard regiments, a tempting proposition for any orc warboss. But the deal was missing something. Bluddflagg would demand one more thing: the Inquisitor's hat, which he had taken quite a fancy to. No hat, no deal. Unimpressed, Adrastia refused and the deal crumbled. As she left, she made it clear to Bluddflagg that the Eldari they had slaughtered earlier were not responsible for downing their ship, quickly leading to the realization that it was the work of the Inquisitor. Enraged, Bluddflagg would lead his boys to war across Typhon, flattening a band of chaos-corrupted Imperial Guard and discovering teleporters that would take them back out into the Aurelian subsector. Once they finally tracked down Kyrus, Bluddflagg had decided he'd had enough of his loot being destroyed and faced the brutally corrupted Space Marine just before he ascended to becoming a Demon Prince. He ordered a rock bombardment that would destroy Kyrus and in the process save the Aurelia subsector. Bluddflagg would then set his sights on Adrastia, but instead of killing her, he simply bonked her over the head, tossed her aside, and left with the most precious loot of all: the Inquisitor's hat. This orc would come face to face with the High Lords of Terror before leaving them utterly speechless. During the War of the Beast in the 32nd millennium, the Imperium would face almost complete destruction at the hands of this gigantic orc horde after continually underestimating them. The orcs would deploy Attack Moons, a giant void craft capable of almost instantaneous travel through subspace. They would jump from system to system and use their firepower to destroy massive battleships and in some cases entire planets. The humans were in complete disarray, having almost no organization or plan to deal with this sudden, massive Ork incursion. When one of these attack moons appeared above Terra itself, left defenseless by the recent defeats the Imperium had conceded, it looked like this could be the end of the very heart of the Imperium itself. However, when all hope was lost, an unprecedented event took place. An Imperial vessel landed on the throne world carrying 3 Orks, including one, shockingly, identifying himself as an ambassador. These Orks were part of a new subset of more advanced Beast Orks, similar in appearance to their warlords and capable of learning a world outside of the War. Upon meeting the members of the Senatorum Imperialis, the ambassador would identify himself as Bezrak, and to the amazement of the High Lords, he did so in Gothic, their common tongue. Bezrak demanded that Terra surrender or face their inevitable death. The High Lords were left speechless and completely unable to give a coherent response. Bezrak was so disgusted at the humans' apparent cowardice and lack of resolve that he deemed them unworthy of his time, taking his leave and departing Terra, leaving the humans to face an onslaught of Eldari and Ork invaders that would push the Imperium's military might to its very limits. This is the conspiracy of Ork dentists in Warhammer 40K. Now, serving the Warbass Drogbag, an Ork pain boy by the name of Toothjaw would routinely perform operations on his leader following combat. Over years of fighting, Drogbag had visited his trusted pain boy to be patched up on many occasions, but each time he would leave feeling just that little bit smaller. Not thinking much of it, he would continue to visit Toothjaw until one day, as he recovered from a procedure, Gretchin would let his boss know that Toothjaw had been taking a little bit off the top each time he went under. Enraged by this betrayal, Drogbag confronted Toothjaw, who would now challenge his leadership and face him in battle. And because of just how much Toothjaw had stolen, he was able to defeat Drogbag and reshape their band of Orks to his vision. From this point forward, any Ork pain boys under his command were treated like royalty. Every single Ork in the mob was made to undergo a small amount of modifications, and during those procedures, the pain boys would rip teeth from their patients, all while stealing weapons and shiny bits to keep for themselves. With a guard of Killer Khan orderlies to keep patients in line, Toothjaw was eventually able to control almost all of the wealth across his warband and form his own fleet from the riches he and his cohort of Orkish dentists had stolen from their patients. These Gretchin went on strike, formed protests, and eventually started a rebellion against their Ork masters. This is the story of the Gretchin Revolutionary Committee. Now, the Orks are probably the last ones you'd expect to rise up in collective action against unfair practices in the workplace, but that's exactly what has happened on the planet of Gorka Morka. The mech boys in charge of the planet created a system that allowed them to totally control which of the Grots were able to go to the Big War. A certain number of the working Gretchin would be given tokens for their efforts. When the Big War begins, having no token means being left behind. Now, this didn't sit right with many of the Gretchin. After all, they slave away for the benefit of the Ork and are abused by them at every turn, only to be told that when destiny finally comes, they would be left behind. The Grots decided to rise up in revolt, chanting slogans like "Tags for all" and "We's all green." The mechs tried to put down the initial revolt, with many Grots disappearing to the pits, never to be seen again. But the sheer number of them and their collective fighting spirit meant that things soon spiraled out of control. One day the Orks discovered no work was taking place at all. The Gretchin had effectively gone on strike. They staged a march to freedom with huge protests across Mech Town, demanding equal rights for all Grot kind. The Orks would then meet the Gretchin and negotiations would take place, but while these talks were ongoing, a group of Orks decided to attack one of the demonstrations. Negotiations thus fell apart entirely, and the one fairly peaceful protest turned violent, with clashes erupting all across the city. The Grots would put up a good fight, overwhelming the Orks in places by sheer numbers, but eventually the strength and superior firepower of the Orks won the day. The Grots would be sent on the long march back to Skid Row in the shame of defeat. Some, however, did not give up the fight. They organized themselves into a rebel force known as the Committee. The rebels would continue their fight, raiding orc mobs and storming poorly defended fortresses to steal scrap and wreak havoc. The Gretchin Revolutionary Committee, or GRC, still operates hundreds of years later, preparing for the big day where orc control over Mechtown finally collapses and the Grots rise to power. This orc general learned Imperial battle tactics and even fought alongside the Imperial Guard to defeat a Tyranid hive fleet. This is General Tacticus. After replacing General Stratagem as the head of the Blood Axes after he met his demise in an unfortunate accident, General Tacticus would take his seat on the council and begin wearing the old general's uniform. Stratagem was widely considered a genius amongst the orcs for his tactical ability in battle, far superior to that of any orc that had come before him, and luckily for the Blood Axes, Tacticus was to prove himself yet another step above the rest. Having somehow acquired some scholar progenum, he figured out how to read them and would go on to structure his newly acquired war in the image of the Imperial Guard, employing their own tactics and structure in battle against them. During one such battle in which neither side was making much headway, the Imperial Guard would experience Tacticus' ability firsthand. While locked in their stalemate, a Tyranid hive fleet would appear above the planets they were fighting over. Wildly outnumbered, General Pyrrhus of the Imperial Guard would call upon Tacticus to enact a ceasefire while they dealt with the Tyranid threat. With both sides facing complete annihilation, Tacticus had no choice but to agree, and their first act was to work with the humans to evacuate Imperial civilians from behind the front lines. To the surprise of all involved, it went swimmingly, with both Orc and the Guard standing together. As the fight against the Tyranids continued, the humans and the Orcs continued to fight in shocking harmony with one another, even starting friendly competitions with each other over who had killed the most Tyranids or who could reload the fastest. The final battle of the conflict saw an all-out assault on the Tyranids, with hordes of Killer Khans serving as line breakers for heavy weapon assaults on the leading Hive tyrant. Once the Hive was defeated, Tacticus would once again display his tactical prowess, flanking the humans with his mechanized reserves while the battle was ongoing, and capturing Pyrrhus, along with his entire command staff and all of their supplies. Standing over the now defeated Imperial General, Tacticus explained how he had outsmarted them with the use of their own diversionary tactics. He then reminded Pyrrhus of the cardinal rule when it came to negotiating with Xenos: you don't. With a heavy heart for an enemy he had gained respect for, Tacticus executed Pyrrhus for treason, just as the Imperium's ways had taught him. This orc would find his severed head transplanted onto the body of his former war boss. This is Wazdaka Blackhawk. While fighting in Boss Badget Snazhammer's mob, Blackhawk had always had visions of leadership, claiming to be second in command. However, a fellow boy, Mogrot Redtooth, always had eyes on that same position. When the mech lord Tekwa went to battle against an Adeptus Mechanicus fleet, both Blackhawk and Redtooth would get their chance to prove themselves. The mob would invade a Mechanicus vessel and be charged with escorting De Boffin to the ship's warp engine. Before the mob could reach the engine room, they were ambushed by a Castellan robot, or a tin boy as the orcs call them. In an instant, their boss Snazhammer's head was blown to pieces. Blackhawk took immediate control of the situation, ordering the boys to retreat, which would only enrage his rival Redtooth. Orcs don't retreat from a good fight, after all. Blackhawk, driven by his ambitions of power, grabbed Snazhammer's weapon and charged into battle with the Castellan robot. The final blow of the battle would cause the robot to explode violently, and in the process would completely decimate Blackhawk, destroying his body and leaving him as nothing but a severed head. Redtooth, in the meanwhile, saw his chance and seized control of the orc mob. Only the Mad Doc Drozfang stayed, for he had other plans of his own. The Mad Doc lived up to his name and attached Blackhawk's head to his former war boss's body, making him even more powerful than he was before. The pair would then head to the engine room, where Deboffin had already installed a warp decapitator and now busy arguing with Redtooth about who would activate the device. In that moment, Blackhawk would step forward, knock Redtooth out cold with a single blow, and declare that he was the boss once more. Not one of the boys disagreed. To thank Drozfang for his work, Blackhawk would swear to supply him with all of the teeth and reluctant patience that he could ask for. This Orc warboss is living every Orc's dream, fighting to the death, then resurrected to do it all over again for the rest of time. Once a powerful Orc warlord, Tuska is famous for his many battlefield trophies, enjoying nothing more than an upwards fight against enemies far more powerful than himself. After winning an epic battle with a demon aboard his flagship, the kill cruiser Gorejaw, Tuska would gather as many weird boys as he could, break through the Imperial defenses around Cadia, and invade the Eye of Terror in search of more demons to kill. For context, this is the place Chaos demons come from, and most mortals stay well clear of it, and Tuska had decided he wanted to go straight into it. His invasion was quickly noticed by the blood god Khorne, who watched the self-titled demon killer travel between demon worlds, devoted to finding a bigger and better fight with each new planet that he visited. Khorne was content to watch until Tuska's unstoppable Waaagh landed on a world belonging to the Blood Prince, a mighty demon who Khorne held in high standing. Tuska and his boys would take heavy losses in their fight against the mighty Blood Prince and his demonic horde. However, just as the Blood Prince was about to finish Tuska off, the warboss's weird boys would use their psychic powers to distract the demon momentarily, giving Tuska the opportunity to impale him between his legs with his power claw, before finally being killed himself. The rest of Tuska's warband was eventually slain, and the Blood Prince stood victorious, but Khorne took such pleasure in the spectacle that come the next morning, Tuska and his warband would rise once again from the dead to fight. Every day henceforth saw them slain to the last Orc, only to be reborn over and over again. Impressed by the Orcs and yielding thirst for battle, Khorne would eventually take them into his own domain, and in the shadow of the Brass Citadel, the Demon Killer and his horde would be committed to an eternal war, fighting against Khorne's elite bloodletter generals. Each cycle would release huge clouds of fungal spores from the dying greenskins, causing the blood-stained foothills of the Osseous Peaks to flourish, meaning more Orcs would be born, grow to maturity, and charge forth into battle. In his element, the Demon Killer had finally found a good fight, and Khorne had ensured the galactic constant of endless war be guaranteed. This Orc almost never leaves his war bike and doesn't even stop to sleep. This is Wazdaka Gutsmeck, considered the greatest Orc bike boy ever encountered by the forces of the Imperium of Man. You will never see Wazdaka apart from his precious war bike, only ever leaving its seat to add more custom bits. Obsessed with bikes since his youth on the desert world of Kassak Prime, Wazdaka has committed his life to stripping down and rebuilding them in his own design. After being accused of cheating during a race of the burning wheels, Wazdaka discovered his true destiny. He ripped apart the Greenskin settlement, hosting the race with his powerful custom-designed Daka cannons, and rode off into the sunset, where he would carve out a legend among the Orcs. Kept perpetually awake by a concoction of drugs given to him by his outlaw Mad Docs, Wazdaka and his speed freak horde would terrorize the galaxy with tireless war during the siege of Scalix 6. Wazdaka and his horde would be engaged by a Titan legion of the Adeptus Mechanicus, led by a gigantic warlord-class Titan. The kinetic slug shooters of the horde could not pierce the Titan's heavily armored and shielded hull as it began to tear through their ranks. Watching his boys being slaughtered, Wazdaka rode up onto a mesa overlooking the battlefield below, revved his bike's engines and launched it from the cliff. As Wazdaka and his bike sailed through the Titan's gravitic force shield, they both burst into flame, and like a fiery comet, he plunged directly through the canopy of the Titan's cockpit. Still on fire at the time, Wazdaka would then slay the entire crew of the giant war machine, bringing the deadly siege to an end and leaving both orc and man in total shock. Wazdaka would claim the still flaming skulls of the Titan's princeps and his crew as trophies to remind himself of the greatest achievement he ever made as a speed freak warlord. So that's it for this video, but if there's any more orky stories that we missed, feel free to let us know down in the comments and we might even cover them in the future. For more bite-sized 40k lore, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more videos like this one.